Hi there, Randi Green here, and welcome to another podcast with Josh DePaul from Integrating Presence. And I'm going to need the assistance of Josh today because I need him to ask some questions. There is an old saying, or for at least for those of us who are in the thick of the work with the factions and the other dimensional realities, that only to grant or only to give what's asked for. You can't just put it all out there, even though that would be nice. But there are laws regarding energy and consciousness and how what can be given, what cannot be given. What can be given must be received in the manner that it is given. The level of energy that is put out there must match the receiving energy, the receivers at the other end. So it's not about just spilling over and giving information here and there on all levels of reality, because that would be that would not be prudent. That will not serve the purpose. It's not about holding information secret. It's about different levels of energy are given with different levels of information. It affects the energy system in different ways. It affects the consciousness potentials of the ones that are receiving it in different ways. And it has implications on if you give too high a vibrational energy to a person who has not yet cleared out certain distortion in his or her energy system, then a too high vibrational type of energy will have two effects. One, it will stir up what needs to be activated, and it will then begin a clearing out process, activation and clean out, and then it should lead to an integration on a higher state of awareness. But if the receiver is not capable of doing that, then the detrimental effect will be that the one that's giving the information will then have a feedback loop and then will then get the repercussions or the effects of the higher type of energy, included all the distortion that was supposed to clean up and be activated in the receiver will then be feedback loop to the giver. So by that, there are laws to protect the giver and the receiver, and it's not out of illness or ill-mindedness and deception that certain levels of information are not given. At least that's how it used to be for the progressive councils. Of course, we have the factions that are now operating in our system using that to their own benefit. And they're using that, of course, in a manner to, as they call it, protect the children. And in that manner, playing on the original rules of what energy, what level can be given to the different domains, the different levels of reality, and the different life forms that are living in these different realities. We have a little bit of a similar, is it in Star Trek movie, Josh, where you have the directive, where you have Captain Picard that is not allowed to enter into these rural or primitive areas because he will then interfere with their livelihood and how they live their lives. And
non-interference protocol or exactly. Non-interference directive.
Yes. So there was, you told me a little story about a Coca-Cola bottle from...
Yes. So the build up to this, see how briefly I can do this, and it's contemplating replicator technology, actually. And hear these tales in the Buddhist canon. There's a central heavenly realm where beings can do this without the technology. Just they can create with their consciousness, and basically the item appears. But in science fiction, there's a technology called a replicator. You tell it what you want and it makes it with the technology, right? And so I got all these different layers. I'll keep this brief and won't go through all the different things, but all of a sudden for me, I wanted to reverse engineer. Mm-hmm. So reverse engineer the reverse engineering of, okay, let's say a replicator we had access to that. Okay, well, that group had to reverse engineer that more than likely from beings, let's just say hypothetically, if not, that the beings who could do that naturally, they had to study them and determine how they did it. And so there's a lot of different intermediary technology I could imagine between the end product of a replicator and how, the natural ability is about. So they had to have all these intermediary technologies to study in order to be able to gather the data and study and, who knows what else was involved technologically that was simulating this. Anyway, so then you would have to, I'll just leave it there. And I got kicked back like, okay, well, the prerequisite from even investigating this stuff would be, one of the big ones was, what would be the repercussions of, Josh, what would you create with this replicator technology, or even for investigation? I was like, no, I'm just interested in the process, but still it implies that it could be used and you'd have to kind of test it to create something, hypothetically. And it's like, well, what about a toothbrush, right? And we'd only create things that are needed, kind of disposable items. I mean, I wouldn't hold up a toothbrush and say, look, I had my replicator technology. I made this toothbrush. Can you believe it? People will look at you like, what? Or my friend, they can manifest things out of thin air. They made me a toothbrush. What? Okay. So, and then I was like, okay, well, maybe that might work. But then I thought of this movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. It's in the 80s. I think the basic premise is a pilot throws out a Coca-Cola bottle absentmindedly out of a plane. It lands in maybe it's actually in the Australian bush or outback, where whatever civilization didn't really have contact with modern society. One of the bushmen or woman, or what, I forget exactly, picks it up, and then all of a sudden they're entranced and engrossed by a Coca-Cola bottle. They're smoothing snake skin. They're using it as a musical instrument, and then everybody gets jealous around it, because he has this object. The tribe gets jealous, and then they're fighting over it. They're worshiping it. So something we normally don't even think of as, a piece of trash or absentmindedly discard of, it had a huge impact on the society. So even the things that maybe don't belong here, what would be the repercussions of that? Would it create a bunch of karmic repercussions, good or ill? So there's so much more to consider at it, and just not at the level of consciousness and wisdom to be able to even investigate something like that. There's all these layers before that would need to be kind of mastered in order to look into something like this. I feel otherwise there might be some violation. Now, speaking to what Randy said, I've experienced those two ways as well. Sharing something forcefully with somebody, it come back and bit me in the ass. Let's put it that easily that way. And the other way, it really had a therapeutic effect on some people that were willing to work with it. And it helped produce profound transformations, at least in my perception of it. Now I'll throw it back to you, but then I already have some questions for you about online audiences, and then this term children, which is more of an opinion than not, but I'll leave that for down the road here.
It's just a saying to play on the idea of the innocence, or the ones that are still in the growth process, or the one that we can, all depending on how we perceive parenthood, right?
Sure, I understand the term, but for me, I like to throw that back and at them and say, well, that's actually a derogatory term. They use it as a derogatory term, but at the same time, it says that people aren't ready. They're viewed as children. But I would just challenge and say, well, that's kind of, you're almost children yourself to perceive other people, other folks, that you're withholding things, or at least withholding a lot of the educational processes in order to get people to the level where they can receive certain things, right? If you're totally giving up or neglecting educational aspects where they could, and so I guess that gets to the children. But to me, for someone that's, let's just say maybe an elitist, to call someone a child, that's almost childish in and of itself. That's the only point I wanted to make. I get the idea.
Yes.
But,
So it's all about this, that there is a growth process that needs to be made. And in the olden days, under the old world order that were under the councils, the planetary councils would decide how to progress, evolve, mature, educate, upbring the children on this planet, which if we look on a grand scale, and I don't agree with what I'm saying here, let me put that disclaimer in here. I do not agree with what I'm saying, but this is how they have viewed us. So that's important to understand. We might not like it, but this is what has been going on. That is what has been going on. So let us sit with that for a second and say, okay, I don't like it, but this is how it is. I don't like things that are going on in this world right now, but this is how it is.
Exactly.
So the question is, how do we change that? And that goes into the replication or reversal engineering of technology that then go into what are the effects of it? What's the karma of it? What's the energetic output of it? What's the purpose of it? What can be given? If they can't receive it, as a mother myself, I can say, I can look at when my kid was young, or an infant, I could look at her and say, I know what she will become, but she's only 3 months months old, so I'm not going to teach her advanced quantum sciences. What would be the point? Her brain is not developed yet. She can't receive it. She can't process it. So it would be a waste of energy and a waste of, I could of course say, well, perhaps there's some osmosis effect that if I teach her when she's in my womb, she might actually get it. It will be lodged into a neural network, and that would be experimental. And I'm telling you, Josh, this is going on. They are doing it already. How can they progress humanity quicker than they did under the old world order?
Baby Einstein. I've heard of this thing called Baby Einstein, where they,
yes,
they teach the kids.
Point
really
being,
early,
the planetary councils, which are mentioned as part of the Great White Brotherhood, whether we like it or not, as mentioned in the New Spiritual Community information system that began with Alice Bailey. She was one of the first ones to talk about the planetary councils, and they were combined by races of what we call lunar, solar, and stellar races that were joined together in these councils, and that's how they decided to do things. I have worked with the Bailey material not because I'm in agreement with it, but because there was this is kind of historical evidence of some kind of planetary council that actually tried to progress humanity. They did not succeed particularly well. We can say that, all depending, of course, if we say within the technological realm, perhaps they succeeded there. In the psychological round, not so much, because we have seen that just has been played out again and again. For me, that was what began my process and my questioning, as in, okay, if they have made out these thousands and thousands of pages of how that could be implemented into reality, and the teacher that she has, the Tibetan, tells her that the Planetary Council will be changed in 1959 and new teachers will come. And we have seen who were the new teachers. Well, technically, that were the parallel system Greys and the conglomerate of the Orion system and the Dark Lords of the Rings, or whatever we are calling all of these different factions that come in that belong to the dark alien agenda. Or the negative alien agenda. And we're kind of saying, well, were they the new teachers? Is this a way to be taught into the reality of what things are? You've been thrown into a dark war. Is that how you wake up people? Or is it just kind of running away with your tail between your legs, being cowards, as you often say, Josh, and just run away and say, oh, I'm not taking responsibility, but we fucked it up. Now we're taking off. By the way, we'll leave you with the trash. And that's how I often see it, as in kind of someone rented my house while I was in coma somewhere, and I wake up out of my coma, come back to my house, claim it, but the ones that rented it completely trashed it and demolished it and ruined everything, and I have to build everything up from scratch. Not to say that the world has changed while I was in coma, and I suffer from short term amnesia, and I'm trying to regain who I am and get my shit back together, excuse my language, get my stuff back together, get myself back together, and figure out, okay, what's this about? What's going on here? What has happened to my house? When I left it, I was in my teens. Now my skin is wrinkled, and all these questions that I think is very similar to the process that those of us who are doing the activation process, that we're having this huge gap where we have holes and blank slates. Technology has been used and we've been white. We can't remember who we are. Some of us have been, not me, but others have been in oblivion for eons, and with thousands and thousands of years recycled over and over again. Their energy system is worn out. Their genetics has been traded off. I don't want to go there. Just saying this is the situation we're in. So with what I would kind of ask you, Josh, would you like to know what the new parallel inner domain races are concocting in their, what we call galactic level of the councils, and what they are kind of viewing our system from their inner domain, 7, 8, and 9th dimensional perception of this reality, and what they would like to do, by the way, by the use of alien technology, both within their own council meetings, but perhaps also what they are trying to push our way.
Well, I hope this is a rhetorical question. It's obviously a rhetorical
no,
question.
Seriously, what would, if you were sitting in front of me, sure. I attended one of these meetings yesterday. I can't remember much of it, because the way they build in that, it's not, I go to that council meeting and then I hear a lot of stuff, because these races are not talking. There were multiple galactic, let me explain.
Well, before we get into that, let me pick up some, we can launch in that fully, but I wanted to just do the few things, and it ties in with this too. You mentioned my words of cowards, right? And briefly, what this is from what I understand, these alien races afraid of going out of existence, so they're trying to preserve themselves.
Let's not go there,
we won't go there, but that's what I mean by cowards. Yeah,
Yes.
we'll not go there. But
let's stay focused on,
sure,
because
yes.
you
you mentioned preferences.
I began
too.
the transmission, Josh. We need
Okay.
to go. We need to go to where I asked you a question.
No more clinging of preferences. That's how we do that. And then the most important thing is to remember the most important thing.
Yeah.
So now, let's launch into this. Of course, the only other thing is, let's preface this to the very beginning, though. You said those who are going to receive this have to be able to handle it. The one fascinating thing that I have to ask, though, is how do we know online, when we're releasing these things online, does it just happens to be those it's meant to hear for, they will? What if so we can maybe pick that up at the end if we're still interested in this. But yes, I just wanted to wrap up these loose ends.
Because what happened was that I made the transfer into the transition and the transmission. So this is important. This is
sure.
Sorry
so
for
let's jump
interrupting.
into your experiences with these meetings.
Cutting you
No,
off.
it's okay.
Yes. So with this, the question is, when I was in that room and I saw the technology they use there is the transmission technology. So it's in the center of it's built up in rings. The planetary councils are built up the same way. You have that piece of technology in the middle, and it translates not language, because none of these races are using language. They're telepathic. They use information system, code systems, holographic imprints. So they don't communicate like we communicate. So in that, when I attend these meetings with my human consciousness, I can't hear anything. But what I do receive is my energy system on the 7th, 8th, and 9th dimensional layers are getting the imprints from the technology that is now imprinted into my energy system as information. And to unravel that, I need someone to ask me questions. I need someone to ask me on the appropriate level, because this level of technology can downsize the information to match your energy system and what you need to know from it. And that's why we really talk about very advanced type of technology that's not a gadget, but actually has the purpose of progressing and evolving and expanding the awareness of the questioner.
Yeah, so that's what we did talk about this technology in a previous talk where you first kind of discovered it. So that was fascinating. Well, one of the things that first comes to mind is, how does this differ, on the 7th, 8th, and 9th? How does it differ on the 7th compared to the 8th compared to the 9th? Where are those lines drawn? I'm sure they overlap, and there's not like a single line too. But then we can go into the standard journalistic questions: who, what, when, where, why, how.
Yeah.
I'm
only using this terminology so you understand it's the inner domains are built up of 3 reality fields that are in 3 different type of energetic bands, which we have coined 7th, 8th, and 9th. So it doesn't mean anything. It's not how it's built up, has nothing to do with their reality. It's just for the helping and assisting of you to understand that we are in a high dimensional level. I could say it's density 3.
Sure. So terminology. So we won't get bogged down in that. So I start with the standard ones. Besides the who, the who, what, when, where, and why.
Okay, now you need to go into the mindset of, you are now here having access to the inner domain of the galactic councils. You are a citizen in the outer domain reality, where you are stuck in this scenario where everything around you has been demolished and ruined, and you're now in the process of building up your own existence to return as a progressive race, as a race that wants to join the original progressive dynamics of civilizations amongst these highly evolved races. There are also races that are not highly evolved, which we know. But for those of us who are trying to get back on track, getting back on the path of evolution, the path of progressing of consciousness and energy to transform energy to its highest purity rate, its highest standards, and its highest progression rate. And you're sitting out there, if you have lost the connection to the original councils, you used to have access to where you as a citizen, whatever level you were on in the outer domain, the middle domain, would attend these councils so that you would have the great perspective of, okay, this is what the inner domains are now putting out of energy information systems so that the middle domain, the outer domain can evolve and evolve, not devolve, but evolve, but also to some degree devolve what is no longer of need, but evolve what is of need to live up to the new standards that has been put in by the Galactic Council.
Well, it would be in any kind of oracle or higher level system I've access to, the standard question, what's the most important thing right now on an individual level for me here and now, long term, and then also for others, and then collectively for everybody, short and long term. That's to start with that, because that's you don't have much time. That's what the most important question is. The most important question.
Yes. So and
what's the
again,
most important?
And then I would have to ask, well, that's relative to energy system. That's relative. So this is again asking the right questions to get the right answer. And this is where we come in with the understanding of the children, because I'm giving you access to, like in what you call the crystal skull with Indiana Jones, where she's the Russian girl. She says, "I want to know it all," and they give her all, and she blows up, right? So this is about asking the right questions.
That's why I asked this one. What is the most important thing collectively for humanity at this time?
Yes.
So where should people pay attention to?
Okay. So this would be kind of we can't answer the question on behalf of others. We can only answer the question on behalf of who and what we are and what we perceive to be the most important thing.
Yeah. So what is the most important thing for yourselves? Yeah.
Yes. So
that's what I'd ask. What do they perceive as the most important thing? Then?
Yes. No. What would you perceive to be the most important thing for your own progression journey and for your expanded awareness? Because the law of the first of the many kicks in. So when we attend these councils and when we become the transmitters, or not that I am the what we call the ambassador or anything. This is when we attend to these councils, those of us who were interested in that, it would be as in kind of, we would go there, we would get the information, and then we would, in a little way, reverse engineer it to our system, saying, okay, this is the standard for the entire inner domain. This is what they are now putting in motion. They are putting in motion these technologies that emits specific type of rays, which we know from the condor rays. They are kind of core domain technologies that are then being fueled in to administer specific type of vibration that is now being run out to the middle domain in the different layers of density 2, and will be rippling out into our outer domain with what we call ripple effect technology. That's how I would translate it. So we already have the time wave continuum that are blasting back and forth between the inner domain, the outer domain, to recalibrate our entire reality field. That is running up energies, and that's stirring up energies that are stirring up old timelines. Since the last couple of days I've been going through literally one past life every day. So they are amping it up for those of us who can activate. As I said, the high amount of energy is put there to activate so we can clean out, so we can integrate. So what's the process of integration? That is to integrate what we have lost, so we can remember who and what we are, so we can get back on the progression path by not necessarily saying, oh, I was this or I was that, but reconciling and understanding the moment of death, the different challenges we put upon ourselves when we entered into this system. We chose certain tasks, certain quote unquote missions, certain things we wanted to progress and develop inside this universal structure when we entered into it, when we spilled over from the previous one, when we came to be here again once more, so we could fulfill our eternal journey of progression and evolvement and development and whatever we want to put into this one, to the highest level of what we can become as beings unfolding consciousness and energy. So that would be my answer to your question.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So most of my questions would have to deal with what's and how's.
Yes.
You know, I'm immediately thinking, well, I'm just going to turn the tables here. And, you know, from their standpoint, it seems like, well, they want to throw it back to me, right? Well, I want to throw it back to them. You know, what are you, what are you working on?
They're doing what you used to do. They're just doing what you used to do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, well, to me, the biggest thing for me, it seems to be remembering, like we're talking about. Yeah. How can I remember better? Yeah. What is the most important thing for me to remember? And how can I keep continuously remembering?
Yeah.
And especially remembering things that are important for me to remember, because we only have a certain amount of time in this lifetime, right? Yeah. So, you know, how can we make the most of this lifetime moment by moment that's going to be for my long-term benefit and the reality's long-term benefit? So
you see, that's a good question, because here when you say remembering who I am because I only only got a short term.
Not necessarily who I am, but just remembering in general.
Yes,
Part of it
you're
is
saying
who I am.
your body will cease to exist and die and wither away, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But what we can do here when we talk about the progression journey is conscious death. Where we actually go into the death moment when we die, when we cross over, when we do the transition, we do it consciously. And that's one of the reasons why I've gone through the last couple of days, horrendous deaths, by the way, but it all came down to who and what was I in the moment of death? How did I perceive my death? How did I perceive what was happening while I was dying? What kind of state of mind did I have when I died? Was I conscious in my moment of death? And that is what makes the transfer. If we are in oblivion when we die, we cannot choose our continued existence within the next life form, which we used to be able to do. So in that manner, we could say the death came to our system with the lunar scheme that entered into this reality field. That's some of the information I got yesterday. So that transformed, that solidified our physical form into being in the state of oblivion itself, so that our cells were not capable of recording reality dynamics. Our energy system were no longer capable of recording what we have been doing here, building in the knowledge of how to progress with what had been recorded. It's cut us off from our template consciousness unit, so we could not what we call draw on previous existence in similar systems where we had already worked with that type of energy units and energy transformational systems as part of the effects of the timeline event. So that brought in what we interpret as death. That means an unconscious transfer. That means our body deteriorates and does not give off its continued information system. It does not record the information. It does actually cellular memory, but we don't use it correctly. It's stored in what we call the biofield, the emotional field, that will then deteriorate and cease to exist or be drawn in as part of the distortion fields of the astral plane. And only our mental field will then continue. But since our mental field is under the control of the frequency fence, then not even that is transferred to the next life. So that's the blank slate technology that we just are transferred between lives, which then appear to us to be a death because we don't remember who we were. We are not just seeing it as in, I'm going out of this organic suit and into another organic suit where I continue my mission, where I continue what I actually came here to do. So that's the first step of remembering. That is the conscious death process, where we in our everyday life from here on live every day as if we are in, when we go to sleep, as that's actually kind of death. Because many of us have experienced when we wake up, we feel cleared. We feel not in a positive way. We feel wiped. We feel as me, or I've been in other realities, or have been pulled in. I wake up with horrendous sceneries in my mind that takes half of the day for me to clear out, which then distorts my cellular memory because I'm being imbued with artificial fourth dimensional cellular memory that prevents me from actually doing what I'm supposed to do in the outer domain. It sets me back constantly, have to clear that out before I can actually begin with the day. And most of the time, then we have hit the 2 o'clock demarcation line where the energies begin to subside. And then I don't have the amount of energy I need to actually do the daily recollection, remembering, observance, and the work on the path that I'm supposed to do as part of the outer domain turnaround path, which the Kalontics call the turnaround path, which is accurate because in the outer domain, you're there, shed off everything that's no longer of use, rebuild your energy system, and begin working back into the middle domains.
And you kind of read my mind there anyway, because I was going to ask, if it's not recorded the way it was, well, does that imply that it is recorded somewhere else? And then you mentioned a little bit of this, and then how do we access that? And then this just goes to, these old teachings and the Buddhist stuff is how we are during the death moment conditions and plays a huge impact, probably the most biggest impact to the next birth, right? Yeah. Until full awakening. And then of course what you just laid out there, and it sucks is just the easiest way to say it. These are hindrances, right? These are roadblocks. These are you call them prohibiting technologies. I think, or I feel too, and it seems to make sense that addressing those. What is the most efficient use of our time and energy to addressing these hindrances, that these roadblocks that are in the way? Once they're cleared, then this process can go on as it's maybe an accelerated rate or more naturally, and won't take as much time and energy to do, I guess. And then also, I think in general, this kind of, it's more of a new agey question, but it's not either. It's how do we raise our level of consciousness? It seems like higher and more expanded, deeper and more profound, reaching levels and states of consciousness might also assist in dismantling what's hindering, or doing away with these hindrances.
Well, to put it on that level, I kind of already answered all of these questions in the progression sciences in my course material. So here I wanted, that's the kind of, how do we clear out the distortion? How do we get rid of the prohibiting technologies and all the alien inserted technology? And I explained it to the best of my abilities to what is possible to explain in words in the advanced clearing work courses. So I already done that. That's for people to listen through these 60 podcasts, and then in practice and everyday clearing work. I would say what I see amongst most of my students, to keep it on this level right now, is that the discipline around the clearing work and the understanding of how much it takes is not ready, is not there yet. It's like you have a kid that say, oh, I want to be a marathon runner. Okay. And then I tell the kid, well, you have to actually run up to around 10 kilometers per day. If you want to run that full length of 42 kilometers or in even greater, or across the country or what have you, then you have to train that amount a day to get to that stamina and that ability to run so far in one day. So that's practice. And most people don't understand the enormous amount of practice it takes. There is this idea, okay, I only need to do it morning, evening, or midday, and just 1 hour or 3 hours a day. And I would say that's the minimum requirement. And then people come in and say, oh, I can't do that because of my work and this and that, whatever. And that's the first hindrance. The hindrance is the aspiration is not strong enough. And we've heard that in all of the whatever. That's also one of the points in the councils. The aspiration for the humans inside this enclosure, even though it is a quarantine, and they are fully aware of the obstacles and the struggles and the solidification. And there's been given so many teachings regarding that, including old teachings, the Buddhist teachings, the chakra system teachings, the White Brotherhood, whoever faction they were from. There's been given so much, the Kalontics. We can go on and on and on and on. But the point is that most people get constantly drawn into everyday life, into the base program. They prioritize their current existence. And if they constantly do that, then you can stand and literally be as benevolent as you want to. You can try and do as much as you want to. But the enclosure itself is tied to our 3 lower fields. And unless we clear out the 3 lower fields, their enclosure will remain. The astral barrier technology is gone. It's broken down. The plasma crystals are gone. 4th dimensional plasma crystals. The frequency fence has been altered. Yes, we have definitely negative alien agenda going on there as well. But since most are not in control of their mind field yet, then that's the last thing to go. If people would focus on their biofield, their emotional field to begin with, the distortion level that prevents the heart field from activating would then activate. And that would be the largest step humanity has to do, which is why all spiritual teaching systems, all clearing activation systems says the heart, compassion, the loving kindness, the ability to see what is there as it truly is, not what we want it to be, because we're in denial, we are in delusion, we are in fear mode, we are running all sorts of scenarios and shenanigans of what we want to be and what we're afraid of loss, we're afraid of letting go, we're afraid of so many things. And that's the biggest hindrance, not the technologies. They're just upholding that.
Yeah.
that comes in later once we have learned to clear these lower fields and actually begin the progression path of liberation. Then the technology kicks in. Until then, no need, because the collectiveness in itself, the human needs, the human desires, the human whatever is in the way. They don't need that technology.
This is fascinating, because I have this opportunity now, and I don't want to go back and rehash so many things, but I also don't want to dive into nitty-gritty specific details that don't have, because I can go into those all day long and they fascinate me to no ends. But as far as a public arena, so have to kind of consolidate here.
No, you be the first of many.
Okay.
And represent the collective with who and what you are, and do it to your best ability.
No pressure.
Not thinking about what others would like, because you don't know.
Right. Okay. Good point. So you talk about creating crises, and that's the way you put it. And, you know, I won't go into that so much. The way I look at it is urgency. And I've noticed that when I'm basically forced to do this, so don't have any other option, that's when it really comes alive. And it almost seems like a life or death thing, right? Or there's some kind of huge importance, and it's not necessarily even valued so much. It doesn't even seem like I don't value this or not value this. It's like there's no other choice but to do it. Yeah. When I was in a position in life when it was like that, the amount of progress exponential, right? But then I started getting these added benefits, and things just started to heal naturally. And then I got back into a kind of a comfortable space as well, which is okay too. I mean, it's to me, it's about knowing when to push and when to draw back and heal, and this kind of get in these types of rhythm, but not get too, erratic of a rhythm or too comfortable in a rhythm either. So it's this kind of balancing act and playing. But
let me answer that one first, and then you will ask the next question. So, as we say it in Danish, despair teaches a woman to weave, right? So if you're put in this situation where you're painted up in the corner, which you would say in English. So there you have to figure out, okay, how do I get myself out of this jam? And then you become not as much relying on your comfort zone, your previous ways of doing stuff. You are then forced into a situation where everything is an unknown. And you're forced to go across your comfort zone. So you're forced to go across what you normally would choose as a habitual pattern of, this is what makes me feel comfortable. So a crisis is to push a person into a situation where he or she feels uncomfortable and not drawing on habits and what they normally do to resolve the situation. We could call this psychologically defense mechanisms. We could call it comfort zone patterns, emotional patterns, what we have learned so far works for us. So we need to be pushed out of what normally works into what does not work. Then the new level of fear comes of the unknown. I'm here now, not in control of this. Not that we are ever in control of everything, but that's how the human mind works. And then we step back. We'd rather be painted in a corner than actually throw ourselves out and say, okay, I might get dirty. This might make me messy. I might have to do it all over again. But clearly I chose a path here that led me to this corner from where I now am in a situation where I either break the whole thing down, mess everything up that I already created, or sit still and wait until the paint has dried, and then I can paint the rest. But this is some paint that will take forever to dry off, so now I'm stuck there. Patient, and I have to pee and after this. So anyways, it's a good analogy. So we can play with that one. So the question is, do we need crisis? No. You see, in the normal progression dynamics, we wouldn't need these ups and downs and the highs and the lows. Yeah. There would be what we call intensification of the vibrational pattern is a wave pattern. So there would be uphill and downhill. And the peak where we would harness in our positive way, where we would harvest the fruits of our labor, so to speak, where we would get, that's typically on the 20th every month, where we would get the feedback of our complete uphill work, where we had worked with different forms of energies. What's the uphill work? That's transformation. So whatever comes into our life while we're in the uphill of the first 20 days of the month would be that we are literally transforming everything that comes our way using loving kindness, using the heart energy, using the deep understanding of what's actually in front of us, not what we want it to be, but what is in front of us that we need to work with. How do I transform this into to the highest beneficial rate for what's in front of me and what is in me as well, because clearly due to the law of cause and effect, this has been pushed into my system of acknowledgement, of perception, so I can transform not what has been pushed into my field, but what it represents to me, what it is a symbolic representation of. I cannot change the other, but I can change myself.
And those actions matter now.
Yeah.
How we see it matters now. What we think about and say about it and act on it or don't
and
act matters
see
now.
things as they truly are, so that when we are in transformational process, that will build in more complexity and code systems into our own energy system, no matter what comes our way, we then have the choice in that moment, in that encounter, how do I choose to deal with this? And that's why the principles come in, as I've talked about in progressive systems, because it's not just about compassion. If you're in front of a predator, you have to address that that's a predator, and love does not change everything. It does not change a predator of the third system that has a completely different code system, that is not receptible of love, that is not receptible of progression dynamics, that do not want to receive any of this.
Sure.
But you can learn in that process, how do I respond to this? What is my proper way? And sometimes, as of the last 2 days of my death moment, I was up against severe level of evil. It's kind of called the realms of ignorance, where you're dealing with beings that has no capacity of progression dynamics. They don't understand it at all whatsoever. They're just doing their old ways, literally solidified in their old hostile, negative, evil ways of the wars of the third cycle and previous universal structure. And they're the only thing I could do. I knew I'm dying now. That's how it's going to be. And without fear, and this is just how it's going to be, that's a conscious death. I know now my body will not survive this. So what can I then do to ensure that I get to the gate where I can do the conscious transfer into a level of reality that actually is suitable for my journey that I'm doing in this system? So it's not about transforming others. It's always about transforming who and what we are, to be able to navigate in the reality field we're part of with that proper amount of energy that is needed and suitable for the situation we're in, to transform what is needed according to our own original mission statement, as I call it, our original purpose of why we are in this system. And that differs. So that means the moment of death will be different for each person, but we can say that those of us who went into this universal structure with the idea of the progression dynamics to get them back in play, contra to the wars of the third universal cycle, where everything went south, is that whatever we do, whatever we are in front of, we need to remember what we took on as a vow, as it's called, as I call it, that gives the code, the main code system of our consciousness units and our template structure. And always recall that that's the highest level of remembering, that you actually remember, what did I want to achieve here? Not who created me or what created me or what's going on, but what do I want to achieve here? And how do I live that to the highest purity rate, the highest standards, and the highest progression rate? So I, as the first of many, sets standard that others can follow as well. And that's part of when we talk about the path of liberation. That's where we're co-traveling. But there's always the ones that go first. There are always the ones that sets a new standard. And they deliberately choose crisis as a means of transformation, not a crisis as if this has been done to me as a victimization, but as a chosen challenge that pushes the path, the transformational path that is like a light code highway into a higher purity rate, where others then can be able to progress even further.
Beautiful. Another good reason for remembering, right? The vow, if folks have made those vows and then have forgotten. Yeah. Going back to creating crisis, there's no cultural support for any of this either. I guess in progressive societies, there would be people all around where it's part of the culture to do that. Here we have celebrities and politics and shopping and, what? So there's value your spiritual friends very highly. I don't like the word spiritual, but progression friends, folks that are in this, because you're not going to get support from the base program for this, right? You have to make a concerted effort to do this, or take responsibility for ourselves and give our own selves support. That goes without saying all along. So also about hitting barriers, that came up too. Sometimes, paint ourselves into a corner, or trying to break through barrier after barrier, just seem surrounded or imprisoned by walls that I don't know how to get through this. Our ceilings, I think a ceiling is a good metaphor here too. I keep going higher, but I can only get this way. And people can get disheartened or discouraged, and this is it. So having that drive, that aspiration, that's part of one of the powers too. The investigatory process, like when we started off, relentlessly investigating and questioning things, to penetrate. That's what they call ask, like an axe, to break through things, right? Yeah. And then exploring, the consciousness level of this too, the mind development. And the only way that's going to get amplified and opened up and be able to progress through wisdom and know how to get through these things is to open the heart field, because that's what allows higher and higher levels of the mind and consciousness too, and fuels it as well, and vice versa. Now, going back even further here, the stuff is laid out in the course material, yes. And I was going to ask again another mind reading of what's changed since then. And I think you did provide a little detail of give us an update here, right? Has anything changed with the prohibiting technologies other than what you say in your courses and you just said prior to that? And then the last thing here that really struck up and that comes back again and again to prohibiting is fear, right? Fear on different levels, fear of the unknown, fear of losing friends. Yeah. Fear of a loss of money, a loss, I might be defamed, all these different ways that fear of the unknown, all these different flavors of fear.
There is a deeper level of fear that humans have forgotten they have. And that is when this system got hijacked and what happened here, some of the atrocities that happened here. And I think one of the reasons the past lives have been going through actually been under some of the teachers of the lunar councils, but we'll just leave it at that. But this is tied to what we call their effect on our system and why death came to our system. So they're of course administering their transgression rate in that manner. Just to put it short and simple, it's much more complicated. It's not just about them clearing their own karma, but it's kind of, if you mess up a system, you also repair it. Goes without saying, the ones that create is the only one that can uncreate it. So that's the more positive side of it. That goes with technology and advanced technology as well. So when we have that, if we have an effect on something, it's our damn job to clean it up. So I think that's important to first and foremost get into the point in our meditation contemplation practices, in our path of observation or practice of observation and remembering who and what we are, is to understand that we're not victims. Step one, get that power back, people, and go in and feel the strength in your heart and say, okay, at some point in this journey, something was messed up. Let's begin with that one. And without shame and blame, just go in and say something was messed up and begin to have a little bit of solution-oriented look at it and see it as it truly is. One of the reasons I think, and I've seen in many of the ones I've healed over time and the ones I've been working with as a progression mentor and coach, is the initial fear that brought them into oblivion. And some of the things that I see, and when I do I've picked up doing the higher order energy system assessment, which is not a template reading, but it's different. It works on the energy system instead of the template level, which is more accurate where we are now. So people can kind of get a feeling of, okay, this is the last high level I have in my energy system. This is where I need to begin to do the work. So the first step of observance and remembering is to get to the point where we were thrown off. And for many, it's the going into oblivion. And I've seen many did that deliberately. They did it because some chose to work with the hijackers, and then they saw what was done to their fellow beings, and they felt so ashamed that they chose to go into oblivion as a self-punishment. So if people have that self-punishment on them, then that is something they need to work through. They need to work through that they made a choice of first collaborating, causing harm to their own race, and then at the end of whatever went in, chose to say, no, I'm just going to take myself completely out because I've done so much atrocity, and this is the only way I can repair what I have created, by making myself demolish and cease to exist entirely. So that needs to be addressed, and go back in and say, that was going through the shame and the feelings of that situation. And that's not nice work. I've gone through some of the same levels on my timeline work, and that's a difficult work. It's enormously painful and it's enormously saddening. And we need to have these emotions, not going to victimization, not going to self-blame. And this is where I would say this is advanced psychotherapy, which I am getting into doing course material on and working with people in the higher order Density 1 Work Institute. That is Randi Green and I. So I'm working on that, coming up with new ideas. How can we do advanced psychotherapy? Because I know I can do that. I used to do that with my clients back in 2014, 15, and 16, and including healing before everything was thrown off when we connected to the Dark Galactic Core in 2017. So we're picking that one back up as well. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed there, but there are also people that were put under what we call imprisonment templates because they pissed off the hijackers. So that was a different type of. So we have all these different, why are people now in oblivion? And that's the first step that must be investigated, as in, why have I put myself in? Literally just saying I here and take responsibility for our own journey, pushing ourselves out of the victimized state and not going into the oppressor or being angry and this is unfair and go into all war mode, because a progressive warrior works completely different with what we understand as a strong, empowered person. Is the correct use of power and the correct use of energy. That actually goes with the inner domain levels. So you're not really learn how to do that until you reach that level, until we truly know how to work with correct power and energy. Then we must take the path of compassion. That's the most safe path to take, that we work with our own issues, that we find compassion to ourselves first, that we do self-nurturing, that we do reparenting, that we work with the layers of our emotional field, and in that work have that deeper understanding of how to be compassionate towards ourselves and our own body. Find that relaxation, find that high-level oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine that gives the correct aspiration incentive to do the work, so that when we begin to focus on others, whoever they may be, however predatorious and perverted and whatever's out there, because that does not take it away, but we will address it differently. We will address it with an equanimity, with what you call a balance point, where we have that not necessarily kindness, I love my predator, Stockholm syndrome, but that we are addressing what's actually in front of us and know what we can do and what we cannot do. That's the original understanding, being humble in our energy work. And that the focus is not to change others, but to change our own energy system. The path out of this system and the enclosure and the distortion fields is to transform our own energy system, not to resolve or dissolve or transfer or do anything with others, because they have chosen where they are. They have chosen not to remember, or they simply can't remember. And if it is the case that they can't remember, either way, whether they've chosen it or they can't, there are only so much we can do, as in kind of, you can drag the horse to the water pond, but you can't force it to drink. So if people are crippled by their own shame and their own fear or their own choices, and they are not addressing them, and just go in and go in and work with it and cry the tears and go through the past life process where that was chosen, and then energetically get at peace with it, put it into that point where we're in balance with, I chose that. Okay, I chose that. How was that detrimental to my original vow? What do I then need to do now to compensate and rebuild and restructure what I did back then so I can repair my energy system. Because it's not about redemption and redeeming and feeling all sorts of whatever we can come up with. Yes, there will be pain. Yes, it will break down the solidification around the heart field, and that's the crying and the pain and the suffering we go through, so we can literally remove the heart field barriers so it becomes vibrational again. But once we get there and we have the true understanding and knowledge of how we progress as human beings, then it is to understand the compassion dynamics in its full length, their full length, into what it means to repair our energy system. Once we have done that, then we will begin to emit a light. We will, as the first of many, show the way by being it completely. And that will then ripple into, that's where the vibrational field comes in. That will then ripple in and activate others where they are ready to activate it. Because not only have we gone through all of the stages of what it means to activate, but we also have all of these dimensions built into a vibrational field. So our vibrational field will naturally adjust to, due to the laws of cause and effect, will naturally adjust to what's in front of us and then give the correct vibrational emission, the true compassion to what that other being needs, so that he or she or it or whatever it is can continue its own evolutionary path. Or if need be, literally say, I see who and what I am. I know what I have become, and I choose to release myself. I choose to just discard this body and move on and let go, because clearly I am so far from what I originally were that I now choose on my own merits to do the return path in another manner that means beginning all over again. But it's a conscious choice, because that being has seen who and what he or she or it originally were, and then chooses that to start all over, which will be met with great grace and compassion from the original dynamics of this universal structure, because the foundation of it is loving kindness and compassion, so that everybody who fought in the previous universal cycle, sorry for that language again, you'll probably have to go in and erase that, who messed up in the previous universal cycle, will have the second chance here, so we can all get back on track and continue as we were supposed to from the very beginning.
Beautiful. And can't emphasize this enough, how important this is. And what really resonated for me was just kind of knowing after a certain point how to intuitively address whatever's in front of me, having at some point, it's just inbuilt second nature, and don't even have to have the courage, no doubt really is involved. A lot of times it's just coming from the heart, how we respond to whatever's in front of us. Okay, so now that we're on a public forum kind of here, and can't stress enough what Randi just talked about, that applies day in, day out for the vast majority of people interested in this type of thing. At the same time, flip the other end where, what about folks that have kind of woken up, that can still wake up from a victimizer role, not the one that have been on the receiving end, but the one that have been doling it out, right? Let's just take, for example, some of the elites or the controllers, or people call them cabals, whatever name we want to put, that people in high society or, in states of worldly power, especially, where they present themselves to be something they're actually not. And they do have access to a lot of control and power, and they hide their misdeeds and things like this. Okay. So we talked about this a little before, not publicly, but, how do we address those people? What kind of advice would we give them and the general population for saying they want to get out of this, but maybe the general populace that isn't ready to learn about such dark things that they've done, it might not be in their best interest to come forth and kind of spill the beans and ask for a reprieve or immunity, I think they would want, right? Or there's a specific word, amnesty. I think they were looking for amnesty in order to come clean, release things that they have special access to that would benefit humanity. Maybe some say that they would release some of this if they got amnesty from being publicly lynched or something like this. This is one of the things some people say that they won't come forward and do these type of things. They're withholding because the populace would be like the Wild West.
Yeah. But that's the trap of the mind. You think knowledge will free you. It doesn't. Practice free you. Energy work frees you. Compassion frees you, not knowledge. So what I can say, and the work I've been working as a releaser, the ones that want to turn around, the ones that want to get back on track, as I just said before, it doesn't matter where you are, what you have done, whatever it is. In the light of a releaser, in the light of the ones that carry the codes for this work, there will be more on our planet that will carry that code. There will also be ones that simulate having that code, which doesn't have. That's part of some of the future agenda as well, from the future AI entities and bots and what have you. That goes back to the electric wars that are part of the past of what we call the 1-7 pillar. I call the 1-7 pillar, other calls it the Gaia system. Some of the things that happened here that led to all of the shenanigans. Anyways, point being is we have got AI in the past, we got AI in the future, and they're breaching up. They are also using the time wave continuum, and they know this is a strategy from the benevolence that they are now seeding in humans that carry the gene code that will allow for releasing of others, that will allow for others to see what they truly are, that will allow for that, as I just explained, that energetic transmission where the human get this moment of, aha, this is what I used to be, or the beings on the other levels of reality. You don't need to come in your physical form. Most of the releasing is done by the soul itself, let's put it that way, that is drawn to the releaser, to that energy field that is capable of showing who and what they truly are. So this is what is put out there is immunity, not amnesty, because everybody is responsible for what they have done. So you can't get amnesty, but you can get immunity, and you can get reprieve, and you can get the second chance where you go in, you look yourself in the mirror of the one that shows you who and what you truly are. You see yourself and you acknowledge yourself. You remember. You don't shy away. You don't deny. You don't pretend that has not happened. You take responsibility for what you have done. And then you choose to turn around and do the progression work with whatever you have got left. What is viable will be transferred, and there you begin all over again. And that in itself is the quote unquote punishment. That whatever's left of benevolent, original progressive dynamics and original progressive consciousness units will be transferred out in an orb, put into a new vessel, and you will begin all over. There, remembering what you have done, and in that new, that's part of the restoration program also, part of that new setup, you will learn what you need to learn so that you will remember these mistakes. Because that's what we did from the previous universal cycle into this one. So we already done it already. They have also already begun that journey a long time ago, but decided to give up because it was too much work. So the first step for all, whether you are on the high level of the evil scale, if there is nothing to repair, there's only dustification. This is not, there's nothing to do for these. They know that, so it's not a problem. Most of the ones that have chosen the dark path, they know exactly what they are and what they used to be and why they chose to do what they chose to do. They're enormously advanced consciously, but in the complete reversed manner. So that's just how it is. That's a choice. The goal for us to accept that that's the polarity of us that are climbing up the other hill, and we will deal with that polarity much, much later. That's to be dealt with in the core domains, not the outer domain. So technically that's not our business, but we need to know that it's there so we don't get sucked in and get tempted by all of the little minions these guys have that constantly throws us off our own progression path. That's part of the game, and I don't like it, but this is how it is, and we need to acknowledge these dynamics. The same with the quote-unquote bad guys, the ones that chosen to semi-collaborate with the dark forces. They need to make a deliberate choice. I'm done working with these guys, and then take their own liberation path. That's going to be pretty steep and pretty difficult unless they choose to just let go of their organic vessel and get the immunity transfer that is possible. And that is one of the main things that's being offered from the councils right now for all of these groups. This is now, if you want to do this now, this is what the 21st century is about. This is why we have reached that point of where everything is breaking down. This is where the outer domain resets. And because it's what's called an end cycle, there are the laws of immunity. There are the laws of transfer of what is left. But you have to choose it yourself. No one else can do it for you. It applies there as well. Wherever we are, we have to choose how we want to go, how we're going to do the transfer of the end cycle, going back to the middle domains as a knowledgeable, conscious being, going into the abyss as dust, going through the recalibration dynamics of the restoration programs to go over again and do it one more time, learning what we didn't learn at the beginning of this universe, but we will learn it at the end of this universe. So this is the cycles that will then tie us back up in, and not trying to keep ourselves alive in a distortion, in an enclosure, under quarantine rules, under the rulership of the dark forces or the negative alien agenda, whatever. We have that choice now, but we have to choose it, and we have to choose it consciously, and we have to work for it. And it's not about getting the right level of information. It's about doing the right level of work.
And this is where the coward thing came in from earlier, because they're afraid of non-existing, right? And at the end of the day, it comes down to, and this is where people in power, they want to know what people want. So it can throw back, what do they really want, you know? And time again, it comes down, if I'm trying to understand that, and it doesn't apply to our situation other than the money and power. But, you know, once they have enough money, all they want is power, and to keep existing, right?
And I will say here, all of that is projection, Josh. You don't know what's going on in the heads of others.
I will totally admit that. So the question still remains, what do they want?
That is where I again say, as I said in the beginning of this one, you do not focus on what others want, what others have chosen, what others are doing. You focus on how does that affect you?
That's right.
What's the energy dynamics in you? What does it stir up in you? Which past life did you seek that, since you're now projecting that to the powers that be?
It's seeking to understand.
Yes.
So that's what it comes down to.
You go into yourself, and you take all of this, what you project onto them, you draw back the projection, you look at what you have projected and say, have I sought that in any lifetime? Then how do I clean that off my field, so that as you clean your field, as if everybody on this planet cleaned that in their field, then these dynamics would no longer be allowed energetically due to the law of participation and due to the law of existence in itself. If everybody's working in a specific way, then what we decide is allowed because we emit that into our reality field, and it reflects back to us through the correct law of reciprocity.
Yeah.
Yes, then there will be no allowance for any of this. So if you clean it, instead of projecting it out to the powers that be and get pissed with them, go back in, clear out your own field, and then you will not see it anymore.
So then this comes on both sides, the incentive. What's the incentive? Not to be like an animal that, you get a good little treat if you've been good, not systems of reward and punishment. It's just like looking at the incentives for doing this work wherever we're at, right? Yeah. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose? What's the point?
Yes. And for that, you need to activate your heart field, because once you understand that, then you understand it's not a goal, it's a process. Then you understand, as some of the ones I released, they said, what's in it for me?
Yes, that's
and I just said, what about returning to who you originally were? And for many of these, that doesn't count. I want power. Yep. And then it just kind of said, well, then you go around, play with your power issue and power game and then come back when you're ready. But you will discover that the wrongful use of power will be a wrongful use of energy, and that it will eventually push these beings into the abyss.
Yes, and this is a whole service to self, service to others distinction. And to me, it's just like, it's kind of like this inbuilt, just knowing what to do.
Yeah, exactly. So as I always say to all my students, and my students that are listening to this will know that, because this whole focusing on others, pull it back.
Yeah.
Focus on who and what you are and what you're projecting out there. Take control of this first. Clear that out, because once you have cleared that out, then you will not project it anymore. Then it will not be drawn into your field, and then you will not see it anymore, because it technically does no longer exist in your field. Thereby, you have learned that energetic lesson of how to transform that power, that greed, whatever that is. So what we see outside, what we get focused on, what we get annoyed by, what we are in any ways or forms of giving energy that gives unpleasantness, or pleasantness for that matter, we go in and transform that. So we come into the balance point where we are just seeing things as they truly are, because it is what it is. It's a cup. We don't need to give it ideas of what it is or understanding we're just observing what it is. That's the practice of observance, things as they truly are, and let them be what they are. The only thing we can control, quote unquote, the only thing we do master, that's our own energy system. That's the only thing we are, quote unquote, allowed to master, not others, technically not reality.
It's a good reminder that sometimes these philosophical exercises aren't helpful. What they can be helpful is, like you're saying, they come from within and only really not really only, but they involve us first and foremost, because otherwise it's just a philosophical experiment that we can be wasting time on.
So to tie it into the whole point of the galactic councils or the inner domain councils, and people are saying, why are the benevolence not doing anything for us? And the benevolence just mirror back to us and say, what are you doing? What are you doing for yourself? How are you addressing this yourself? What responsibility do you take for your recalibration? Once we have shown you that the way you change these realities is that you as a joint team begin to transform who and what you are by taking responsibility for yourself. That's the law of the one. You take responsibility for your own energy system, who and what you are. You do what is needed, what is required to clear out your distortion field. So you as the first of many begin the cleanup to take care of your own body, your own house, your own energy system. And from that, you will automatically connect to the higher levels of reality, from where you will then automatically join the races that have gone before us and the races that will come after. From that will continue your progression journey in the manner of expansion within realities and teams and progressive races where you truly belong. So if you want to go home, begin building the bridge that will take you home.
And this is a good place to wrap it up. Self-responsibility, the payoff for that, like you're saying, is more empowerment, and then it just gives way to more responsibility too, which the stakes get higher and higher, and again, more self-responsibility gives way to more power. With more power, you have to be more responsible, and up it goes.
So, and here I would say as the final remark here, that true power is not to conquer the world. True power is not to change others. True power is not to go out there and change the world or get the truth out there or whatever. True power is to master your energy system so you live up to the vow you made when you entered into this reality field. True power is to take the responsibility that's needed to do the transformational processes and do them in accordance with the system that you're part of. True power is to understand your role in the reality field you're part of and do your damn best to fulfill that role and live up to the purpose of function of what you set out to be to begin with, as a true power and expression of empowerment of who you are as a conscious being, but also the true power of responsibility and caretaking of the reality field you're part of, so that everybody can prosper and progress into the highest version of what they can be. That's true power. To service and give service to self, others, and reality for the name of the highest purity rates, the highest standards, and the highest progression rates. So all evolve equally to their highest potentials. That's true power.
Beautiful. Thanks, Randi.
Thank you.